here we come and go, here we come and go. Here we go, here we go. Here we go, here we come and go. Here we go, here we go, here we come and go, here we come and go, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go, here we come and go, here we come and go, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go, here we come and go, here we come and go, here we go.
Hello and welcome to Containers from the Couch. I am Justin Garrison, and today I am joined by Scott and Alex from Ngrok to talk all about a new way to run an Ingress in your Kubernetes cluster using Ngrok as a service to route traffic. And that's really cool. If you've ever used Ngrok before for dev environments, inside of your on-prem environments, whatever it is, you can now do it in Kubernetes. And when I saw the announcement, I was like, that's really cool. Let's bring him on the show and talk about it, because I want to learn more, and hopefully you do too. So, Scott, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, Justin, I'm a developer advocate at Ngrok, and similar. When I've known about Ngrok for years, and then when they approached me about building a developer relations team, and they showed me what they were going to be doing and putting things in Kubernetes and things, I was like, oh yeah, I want to be part of this. I want to see what's going on here, and so that got me excited about Ngrok as well.
Awesome. How about you, Alex?
Yeah, my name's Alex Bezek. I've been working here at Ngrok for about 2 years. I'm on the infrastructure team. And so love this podcast. I learned EKS from it back in the day, multiple years ago. And so I've always been a fan of Kubernetes, and kind of when I got here, everyone had talked about building this Ingress controller for a while, but I just wanted to kind of play around with it. And yeah, here we are. We built a proof of concept and then made it a thing. So it's exciting. But
Cool. And before we jump into the Ngrok specifics, just to give a general overview for Ingress and Kubernetes. I know this is a common thing that a lot of people know about, but it's not the only way to get traffic into a cluster, right? Like, because I could have a service with load balancer type that skips the whole Ingress portion of it. Anyone care to describe what an Ingress is and how it's different than a load balance service?
Sure. Yeah. So with node ports and everything, you normally have to have everything kind of exposed to the internet, or you could have a load balancer that connects in. But with Ingress controllers, there are multiple different controllers you can install. For example, the load balancer controller from Amazon, and you can just create a very common Ingress spec that spins up whatever load balancer that controller is essentially using, and is able to route traffic down, usually directly down into pods, instead of having to go kind of through node ports or anything like that. So yeah, it effectively is a nice common spec that we came up with in the Kubernetes world, so we can move between Ingress controllers to some degree. I know there's some things with annotations that don't always map directly, but yeah, it's just kind of a common way to get routing traffic into those pods from the outside world.
And you mentioned there just two things that I think are important for Ingresses. One is you can run multiple, right?
Yeah.
This isn't a one or done. Like, I can have an Ingress controller for one namespace, and if I want a different Ingress controller for something else or a different type of service, I can expose that with a different Ingress controller, which is good for that flexibility. But those annotations is kind of how we configure these things, right? Like, the Nginx Ingress controller is overloaded with annotations to get every sort of behavior difference on those Ingress rules to be able to configure Nginx in a specific way for a specific service.
Yep. Yeah, that is, we'll probably get into this a little bit, but the Ingress versus gateway spec we don't have gateway spec yet, but that aims to solve a lot of that portability problem between the different ones. And we actually don't have all the annotations on ours. We actually took a different approach that some other controllers do as well, but where there's an actual CRD that has a lot of the configurations. So for the most part, we'll get into it and we'll show you, but there's just usually a single annotation. But yes, you couldn't just take a Nginx set of annotations and map that to a load balancer an AWS load balancer controller or anything like that. So,
right.
And then, yeah, running multiple namespaces or having a public versus a private one is often a common use case. So you have something just on your private network versus a publicly exposed one. Lots of reasons to run a handful of them.
And before we jump to the Ngrok with Nginx, what is Ngrok? What does Ngrok do in general without Kubernetes? What is it for?
Yeah. So a handful of you have probably heard of Ngrok or used it. It shows up in hundreds of different how-to guides on basically exposing your local laptop out to the internet for webhooks was kind of its initial use cases. We'll get more into this in depth, but essentially what it does is you run an agent somewhere, and it started off being on your laptop, but we found you can move this into different environments as well and provide a lot of utility. But it essentially creates an outbound connection, punching out through the network in order to create a tunnel that then you can route traffic back in through. So rather than having to go out and configure all of your different rules, whether you have a firewall or your router or anything going down through the stack, rather than having to deal with all that configuration, especially if you're at home or if you're in an enterprise where you don't actually even have access to the network, this allows you to just kind of punch out and do it in a secure manner. So.
Right, and Ngrok just works that way. I run it from my laptop. I get a public endpoint, basically, that anyone can come see my dev instance of something running.
Yeah, yep. We use it a lot for like webhooks and stuff, but we have like a 3D printer. I run it on my Octoprint, so then you can access your Octoprint from outside. You can add OAuth and different configurations to make sure just not anyone can get in and print something on my printer.
Hey, I was gonna start loading up my STL files. We were gonna start sending them over to Alex.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's dive into why or how Ngrok with Nginx works, because that's the whole point that people want to learn more about. So let me pull in yours.
Ngrok with EKS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
That's good.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of what Alex is talking about, y'all were giving away the ending. So we'll go over a little bit, a little bit of review. No, it's all good. It's all good. And so what we want to do is talk a little bit about Ngrok as a whole, in general, and then talk about Ngrok as a development tool, Ngrok as a production tool, and then Ngrok running it inside of Kubernetes, because that's what we're all here for and what we want to learn about. And so what Ngrok is, it's essentially living in that Ingress space. And when you think of Ingress, there's a lot of different pieces and challenges that you have in configuring that. And they kind of boil down to two basically different groups. One is you have your technological challenges. You have all these different pieces that you want to tie together and make sure that they're orchestrated and that they essentially work together well. But also you have the people challenges. You have the folks who are the subject matter experts on each of those pieces that need to be able to know how their thing works, but also how all the other things work and how to work with the other people. And so it could look something a little bit like this, where you have your users and you have a service and you have this separation between them and you have all these pieces in the way that you got to be thinking about. You got to be thinking about Ingress, but you also got to be thinking about DNS. You got to think about certificates, thinking about DDoS protection, caching. All these things are these technical challenges. And then you have the subject matter experts who are saying, all right, I know about this, but I also know about these things. And then their boundaries sort of overlap with each other. And so then you got to be working with those folks, making sure you have a good orchestration there. And so when you have all of this, this is what essentially adds up to building Ingress between your service and your users. Ngrok essentially collapses that complexity and makes it so that it has a single solution for all of that, all of those things you need to think about. It's we call it a unified Ingress platform, and it's globally distributed. So whenever you have traffic routing through Ngrok, whoever's using it is using it as closest to them as possible. And then also it's environment independent. So it's actually, you can set it up on your local laptop. I could push it to a box inside my network or into my own data center or up into EC2 running on AWS. But in all those places, my Ingress configurations are still the same. And so I can have that. I don't have to think about my network connectivity anymore because it's there.
I mean, that's a huge win, right? Like that's all of that complexity. Like if I think of my home network and I want to expose something, I'm going to go open up a port, set a static IP address, and just like basically bypass everything by saying I have a public IP. I can do that, but some ISPs give you NATed addresses. So now how do I get to it? And
I was going to say, does your ISP give you that? Because I mean, getting that is always just a trick.
In the year 2023, they still do, but I do not count on it forever. So
right. Yeah. Exactly. And so you got to be thinking about that. So when you're running at home, but then maybe you go into the office and you'll have different network settings that you have to be thinking about to get that same application out online. And so it all boils down to, honestly, a thought that Alan Shreve had. He's our founder, the one who created Ngrok, essentially said, developers were essentially being forced to work with the assembly language of networking when all the other parts of development we've abstracted things out, right? We have high level languages that keep us away from, the bare metal, to keep us away from the assembly language. And even then we have frameworks on top of that. And even then we have SDKs and things that help increase our efficiency, but also keeps things quality, keeps our software at a quality level that we need to have to run in production. And so how Ngrok works, essentially, it's this unified, as I mentioned, this Ingress platform that sits in between your users and your services. And there's an agent that runs on your machine. So you have an agent that runs, or that agent, that same functionality, we've baked into some SDKs. Either one, when you use it, they reach out to the Ingress platform, the Ngrok Ingress platform, and they provide that connectivity for you without changing any, firewall rules, changing any kind of ingress rules. You have a custom URL that's passing that data through to your service. And then with that URL, that traffic is tunneled back through the agent and the SDK to the service, and then avails you to additional features. You have more than just Ingress. You can have things like load balancing, certificate generation, DDoS protection, IP restrictions, and then even OAuth, which we'll show a little bit later. Couple of the use cases, as Alex mentioned, our primary use case that we started with, our founder came up with the idea when he was trying to test out webhooks on his machine. So as a developer testing tool, that is where Ngrok made its essentially made its name as a way to expose your local box and make it accessible as you're testing out applications that need to be publicly accessible to the internet. But then what's interesting is when you start releasing things to users and you start saying, well, this is what we think it's used for, users will come back and say, well, how about if we come up with what if we could use it for this? What if we could use it for other ideas? And so we have users that are using Ngrok to essentially provide ingress into their networks. At Databricks, they have what's called a bring your own cloud offering. And it uses Ngrok to allow their SaaS service control plane to talk to their data plane components that are running on their customers' private VPCs. In fact, we have a case study that's on our website that we just released, maybe in the chat, I don't know, but that you can find just the details there if you're interested in how Databricks does it. But what we're here for today is we're here to talk about Kubernetes Ingress and Ingress to our production applications. And so what I want to do is talk about how we can provide Ingress locally to your local development environment, moving that to production, and then talking about how we're going to put it into EKS. It all starts with the agent.
I saw one.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Just generically from the chat about does it work with vPro? Because vPro is allowing people to get remote access to hardware in other locations, and it goes over HTTP. Is there anything that you know of, or people using it in this use case to say I just need access to the low level hardware to do automation or maintenance on things?
I am not aware. Alex, are you aware?
I don't know that specifically, but I believe we have a lot of use cases where people use it to have authenticated SSH access into boxes. If you have devices out in a field or in a mall security type system or a mall network, it's hard to get actual access into those devices. So Ngrok gives the ability to just have a static secure domain that's up and then just to be able to remote access into those. So I'm not quite sure. I haven't heard of that tool specifically, but
vPro is a low level sort of, you can get access like VNC access. So it does have a couple of different protocols that it's pushing over HTTPS or VNC connection. So I don't know of any reason it wouldn't work because you are getting that tunnel.
Gotcha.
But I've never tried it specifically. I do have some vPro hardware I could throw at it sometime.
Yeah, maybe specifically in this, you see Ngrok HTTP. This is creating an HTTP or HTTPS tunnel, but you can also just do raw TCP tunnels in front, Kafka, MySQL, anything like that, and talk any protocol. So
cool.
We definitely have I know a use case that I've heard of is there's a restaurant chain that needed access to their point of sale systems so that DoorDash could actually, insert the orders into the point of sale system. So they use Ngrok on their point of sale systems as a way to have, a publicly addressable, address there so that they can get orders in from DoorDash, Uber Eats, that kind of stuff.
Right, and
So
that
that's
makes
kinda
like
cool.
in those environments, like who knows what the network connectivity is like, right? You're saying that over and over again, like how to get from the outside in is a lot harder than going out. And if you can make that reverse tunnel, anyone can go out in most environments, especially over HTTP. Like I don't know
Right.
very many people that are blocking 443 and 80 outbound.
Right. And so that was their whole problem, was the fact that they had franchises all over and in different network settings in all the different places, and so they needed a unified way to just be able to get that. So
Yeah. I've seen the variance of networks just between different clusters and different environments within, or different companies, let alone different restaurant businesses or different Wi-Fi networks. So
yeah. Cool. So yeah, as I was talking about the agent, essentially that's where it starts. It's you install an agent on your machine. That agent allows you to run the Ngrok command. You tell it the protocol you're running on, HTTP, TCP, whatever you need, and then the port that you need it to essentially tunnel to. And we can either give you a random URL, or you can set your domain and have that so it's a little bit more permanent. In fact, rather than showing slides, actually, let's jump out of the slides and I'll show you some actual code, and we'll do some live demos here.
I did try to go to that URL. I'm a little disappointed there wasn't an Easter egg there.
Yeah. Sorry about that. That's kind of showing the fact that some of these URLs are ephemeral, right? They're going to come and go as you need. We'll have some you can hit though. I promise, Justin. Let's see.
And with that, custom domains are available, right? Like if I have a domain I register and I want to have that as a way to get input, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Totally. I was going to show the domains first that we generate, and then I'll show some custom domains that I have that I'm running on for my personal stuff. So yeah, good lead in. So, all right. So if I have an application here, I have a Go application that is running and we want to see it. So I'm going to have it just run locally here. Go run main. It's going to be running on port 4500, which, as we do when we write our stuff, we say, all right, I'll take it. I'll look at localhost. I have a news search site. It's awesome. I can sit here and say like software, and it's hitting an API and getting some news results for us. But that's good for me. It's not good for you. You guys can't get to it. And so how about we get it so that we can provide ingress to our development environment? So I can have that still running. I'll come over here and say Ngrok HTTP, and then 4500, since that's the port it's running on. And now I'm connected to that Ngrok, Ingress platform. That traffic, they return to me a URL, this custom URL that you could hit. Any of you could actually take this URL right now and hit that URL, and you can get to localhost 4500 on my machine. In this case,
it's very memorable. I like it.
Right. So memorable, right? I mean, it's so easy to find and remember. I can put that in. It's there. And it works. It does more than, it makes it so that you're not having to deal with, like you were saying, finding a static IP, setting up your DNS to route to your IP and all that stuff. It's just doing it for you.
Yeah, and the big thing why this was useful for people with webhooks is it actually gives you HTTPS too.
Right.
You have a secure connection. That was really a lot of the kicker back then for webhooks. So
Exactly. Yeah. So we have a secure connection, a generator certificate for you. That traffic, again, is being passed through the Ngrok platform. And we see here, you can watch your HTTP requests coming through. You kind of have an idea of what's happening. You can even have an inspector that you can go in and watch the HTTP requests pass through. And it's really, really nice for dev and testing.
It absolutely is. I've used it in the past where I was just like, I just want to see what calls are being made. I'm like, wait, I won't go localhost. Let me go just throw this in, Ngrok in front of it. And it's so great to be able to see what's happening and what's being called.
Yeah. It's just super easy. And then even in the inspector, you can actually manipulate the calls. So you can actually replay them. So you don't have to keep hitting an API. You can just change them and change what the body looks like and things. For development, running this process outside of our application works, but it's not very permanent. Doesn't really. And again, like you're saying, the URL, the domain, not very memorable. So let's actually make this a little bit more memorable, a little more permanent. So I'm going to kill this. So sorry for anyone who was trying to access that. And we'll come back here and kill this. And so here, what we have is we have our Go application, and I'm going to change a little bit of the code. I'm going to refer to our Ngrok library. If I know how to comment and uncomment out on live TV. There we go.
Control/. There you go. Yay.
There we go. There we go. It's always harder when you're doing it in front of somebody, right? Like even if it's
I
just
closed
like,
my eyes so you wouldn't be as nervous. It was...
Thank you. I appreciate that. I felt that. It was good. So the Ngrok library basically allows you to take that Ngrok process and put it and embed it inside of your application code. So now you're not having an external agent running. You can actually configure it here. So rather than having net.listen, which is the common functionality you would use inside of Go to listen on a certain port so that when you're exposing or running a web server on your machine, you would use ngrok.listen, which actually returns a net.listener. And so you can configure your Ngrok settings here. So in our case, I'm going to say Ngrok couch go. And on my custom domain that I've assigned to my account, so I have ngrokpaperscissors.com. So that's my own domain. It's not an Ngrok domain, even though it has Ngrok in the name. And then I can set up with my auth token, and we're going to run it here, and just with a regular HTTP serve.
For that custom domain, do you already have that registered somewhere? Do you have to configure that in Ngrok as a, hey, I'm going to use this, and you need to be able to create certs based on it? How does that work?
Yeah, so what we have is you have your Ngrok dashboard that you can go into where you list your domains, and you say, yeah, here's my subdomain that I'm going to use, since I have a lot of subdomains off of this particular domain. And so I'll register that with Ngrok. It will say, hey, do you want me to automatically generate a TLS certificate for you? Yeah, do that for me. And then it gives you that CNAME entry that you put with your domain provider that you can put in with like Google Domains or whomever you're registering your domains with. And so that way you can create that connection. So there is a bit of a step there that you have to do. But yeah, once you do that, it's smooth sailing.
Well, just FYI for anyone using Google Domains, they are shutting down. So don't do that.
Dang it. So don't use Google Domains.
I will plug also with this setup. Yeah, you have to set it up initially, but with the Ingress controller playing in the Kubernetes ecosystem, there are tools like external DNS and everything. And we'll demo the Ingress controller in a bit, but it will actually stamp in that CNAME, and external DNS can automatically wire it up. So it'll go create those CNAMEs in Route 53, and Ngrok will provision the cert from you from there automatically. So there's some nice automation in Kubernetes land.
Sweet. All right, so to go back here, I'm going to run my code again. And now it's running on 4500, but it's also now created a tunnel through our Ngrok Ingress platform. And so anyone can go to couch-go.ngrokpaperscissors.com. And we have our app running, and you're still seeing my machine, but it's a process that's running just with my Go application. So I don't have to be having two separate processes that I'm keeping track of in my terminal.
Where do you get the output for that? Because the nice TUI of wrapping it with the agent gave you what was being hit. Where does that show up?
I missed the first part of the question. What did you say?
Where the TUI that you were running, wrapping it with Ngrok or forwarding to Ngrok, gave you all the endpoints you were hitting and stats about who was requesting it. Where do you see that when you use a embedded library?
So when you use an embedded library, it's now using in production, so you're not going to see, right, Alex? I don't believe you'll see that you don't have an agent running, and it's not, you don't have access to the inspector anymore.
Yeah, there's no inspector, but I believe the tunnel, I believe you get events on a channel or something in the tunnel that right there that you can put into your logger. So like if your service is logging a standard out, like the Ingress controller will log out whenever it gets connection, accept connection, like different connections. So it does get some of the information of what requests are going through there, but you're using it as an SDK in your app at this point. So it's, if you want those logs, you could add them in. And then there's also, as part of the Ingress platform as a whole, you can also just send all of these events into other event sources like CloudWatch or Datadog. So, yeah.
So this is great if you're operating with maybe a single service or with a few services. But if you have a lot of services, you probably want to start thinking a little bit bigger. We want to think of it a little bit, take a step outside of our application and actually set up where we're configuring our Kubernetes. And so that's the real key of what we're talking about today. In fact, this SDK, this Go library, is how we got Ngrok into an Ingress controller, because we were able to embed Ngrok inside of that inside of our Go code. Ingress controllers are written in Go. We were able to use that to build an Ingress controller.
Yep.
So I'm gonna take
and there's no reason
go.
like you couldn't use what you just did by embedding it in the application in Kubernetes,
Totally.
and bypass the the Ingress portion of it. It's like, hey, this pod is going to reach out, but once I have multiple of those replicas, I don't know how that works.
Exactly. Yeah, they actually do label. We have a feature called label-based routing, which was one of the big requirements to really get here. So you can actually have high availability. So you would actually spin up multiple of these. They're all using a label, and round robins, load balances between those. So yeah, you can definitely bake it directly into your apps. Just if you get into more of a polyglot system, that's when Ingress controllers become more helpful. Yeah. But people have made plugins for like Caddy and I think Hugo and things like that, and embedding them directly into frameworks now as well. So
cool.
Yeah, super cool. So yeah, that's totally a way you could do it. But as Alex was saying, if you need to set it more on the configuration level, this is how we would move out to here. And so what I've done is I've taken that Go application that we built that was running on my machine. I created a Docker container, pushed the image up to Docker Hub, and that way I can configure a service. I can configure my service to essentially serve up my deployment of my container down here. So I have my new search app running on port 4500. And then I can configure my Ingress through just a regular Ingress object in Kubernetes. Now, I was able to install the Ngrok Ingress controller as a Helm chart. So we use Helm to install that into our cluster. That way we have that there ready, running on a namespace, so that way it can be referenced here when we set this up. So I can set up my Ingress here with these rules. I have my host posted to this domain that I have, so Ngrok paper scissors. In fact, I'll even change this to live because I like to live dangerously. I have already registered that subdomain with Ngrok and also with my domain name registrar. And so we'll take this and we'll say kubectl apply. Oh, not right directory. Just remembered that. Good thing I caught it before, right? Yeah, okay. And then I'm gonna say EKS. I'm gonna run that. I have my service, and I have my Ingress configured. Come back here. And so I'll take my domain that I have set up. And this is that part where everyone goes, oh no, I hope it works. And it does. So now we're running up on EKS in a Kubernetes cluster. That way we can have our application. It's live, it's in production. It's passing that traffic through the Ngrok platform. And what I can actually do now is I can say, well, I like it here, but I kind of want to restrict who can get to this right now. I want to add some authentication on top of this. So to add the authentication, I would just add this annotation, as we were saying before. Yeah, annotations is how we configure all the things. And so my annotation here is to my OAuth module. So I'll come back here. And then I'm going to comment that out. But also, I want to restrict anyone that is, I just want it to work on ngrok.com. So yeah,
so
go for it.
Just so this you have a new CRD, this Ngrok module sets, which is allowing me to basically extend how not the Ingress controller is necessarily work, but is this at the platform level or is this in the cluster itself?
For the most part, this maps to things at the platform level because we are a globally distributed, basically reverse proxy, essentially. And so all of your traffic goes and hits our edge network. And so from there, we can manipulate traffic. We can enforce OAuth, which is what we're doing here. There's numerous other modules that we have in the docs that you linked, such as adding and removing headers, rate limiting, just all kinds of various modules. So yeah, for the most part, it's all happening at that edge layer. So you actually prevent traffic from even getting into your cluster if it's unauthenticated, rather than routing all the way down to the controller. So.
And you also mentioned earlier that I think that changing your domain here, is that using external DNS, or is that because you have this custom domain as already part of Ngrok configuration and in Route 53 that you're able to get a cert for that domain automatically?
I believe Scott already has it pre-configured, but we did test it as we were doing development. Cool. I believe we tested it out, and I think we have docs on it somewhere. I'll have to double check that, but yeah, it should. It stamps down the CNAME onto that Ingress object, and then external DNS just knows how to read the status of the Ingress object itself. So,
and the last question I have is this cluster you're running, do those nodes have public IP addresses? Is this a private subnet? How is it actually routing that into the EKS cluster at that point, right? Like, can I have a private cluster that gets Ngrok to route into it through that outbound connection, as long as I have a NAT gateway, or how does that work?
Yeah, I can't speak to how Scott set up his demo, but that is actually one of the cool things. You don't actually have to have anything publicly exposed. It can be, as long as you have public internet access out, then it can reach back in with it being completely private. So, but
cool. Okay, can continue on. I want to see this auth module going.
All right. So now I have this. We're gonna run and apply again. Okay, and so that is here. Let's try now. So now, if you try to go to that URL, you're gonna get stopped by a Google OAuth flow. Now, since I'm on the ngrok.com domain, I was able to get in. Now, if someone else wants to try or I can try on another user real quick if we want to give that a shot. I still have it up, I think.
Where'd it go?
Yeah, do you want to give that a shot?
Yeah, I got to add live to it because I was hitting your laptop still.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't DDoS you. I was trying to.
No.
Actually,
that's the nice thing. Ngrok handles that. Yeah, I was going to say, Ngrok should be able to handle that out there. That way it doesn't get to my laptop.
Yeah, it'll block your IP for a little while.
I have the domain wrong. It's not Couch Go Live, is it?
No, sorry. It's Couch EKS Live. Yes. So the Go one was for the Go library.
There we go. And I have a flow that pushed me out to continue to it with an ngrok.com account, but I don't have that. I just have my Gmail account. So it's not letting me in.
If I do that, I can come here. I can come out to a Gmail one. In fact, this is what the domains look like. But if I come here to my Gmail account to see what Justin just went through, I hit here where I'm trying to log in with my ngrokbox@gmail.com. I hit this authentication. It's like, yeah, you're not authorized to see this. So something you can set up easily just by adding an annotation into your configuration there. And then my last thing I just want to mention is, if you'd like to see this demo, or if you'd like to go through the demo yourself, the documentation essentially on how to set up Ngrok with an EKS cluster, it can be found at this URL. You can also engage with me or Ngrok, the Ngrok team, on Twitter. We're there, and we also have a Slack channel at ngrok.com/Slack.
I have those links. I'm working on it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. He does have those links. So.
Okay, they're going out. I think there goes to most places. Sorry, LinkedIn, I'm delayed. I have to repaste it. Thank you, LinkedIn.
I mean, you only have 4 different places to put them in. So I mean, yeah.
LinkedIn doesn't even keep them as links. That's annoying. I'm sorry.
That is yeah.
I like the QR code. That's good.
Yeah, so that way folks can just grab that. If you have this on your screen, scan that and go to that documentation there. It gives you it essentially gives you a step-by-step on how to set this up. It assumes that you know a little bit about EKS and how to set up a cluster there, but it gives a link to the documentation on Amazon to get that. So
if you don't know how to set up an EKS cluster, check out eksworkshop.com because we have lots of walkthroughs on how to get you started.
There you go.
I did see some other questions. I'm scrolling back through. Someone asked about CCTV cameras. I'm assuming that's a semi like that should just work as HTTP typically, right? I don't know anything special there.
Yep. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we have either some conversations with clients or some clients that we're trying to do stuff with that, or people that are using it for various cases like that. I believe video is just a lot of data, so that's about the only big difference.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
What was the other one? Oh, and King James asked here about technology advantages of Ngrok versus something else. I never even knew about these modules, so I think that's a really cool thing that I haven't seen in other options. But what else is there that you think is unique, or what people use with Ngrok with?
yeah, so for what it's worth, we're big proponents of dog fooding our own service. So like the dashboard that Scott just had that had the domains and various other internal applications and CI tooling, we all expose with Ngrok using either the Ingress controller or the agent. And so lots of various modules that are very useful are we use a lot of the webhook verifications for like our Slack bots and different GitHub verification webhooks. And yeah, there's also technically like a private edition that we're starting to put out there, where if you don't actually want to use this our platform as a SaaS, you can actually run the entire, well, at least a subset of the control plane and data planes that we have and connect it to yourself. So that's a little bit different, but
Yeah. Databricks is using that. Yeah.
You showed off the auth module. What other modules are there?
yeah.
Oh, let's see. Alex was talking about how you can set custom headers inside of your requests. Also, let's see.
Let's see. We actually have, this is all of the route. There's a lot of route modules. I believe we support all of the ones by Ngrok right now. I posted, or you can go ahead and forward that link out. But this is our doc site that has it. But we have, really common one is IP restrictions. If you just want a quick and dirty, like don't let anyone outside this subnet or outside my box specifically, like hit this. That's a pretty common one. SAML and OIDC in general are pretty useful. A lot of authentication layers. So circuit breaking, you can easily add compression. And like Scott's little demo site, I think it doesn't have like cache headers or anything. And so he could go write the code in there to add like no cache headers. Like while working on this, we'll see stale content sometimes, but you can also just add in cache headers and things like that via or any header you want really in the request or the response. So.
What about, I saw a question here about dashboarding. So if you have this site running right now, you said this is kind of a production site, so we have to send that information over to a Datadog or CloudWatch or somewhere else for the dashboarding, right? So this isn't built in. This is something else that you can use your existing tooling, assuming you have it. But is there anything by default that I would get from Ngrok in this sort of environment?
I don't think we show, or you have something, Scott?
No, I was just going to say, I was going to agree with what Justin was saying. You had it right on. We have a way to export the events that are happening so that you can use what you're already using today. So you can use Firehose on AWS or Datadog to see what's going on.
The dashboard will basically show you like agents that you have running and the number of tunnels that you have up, but not actual requests and stuff. But I think we are talking about building an event viewer within the dashboard itself. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Which will have basic event viewing features, but we find lots of people are pretty comfortable with the tools that they want or that they already have and just want to have more and more information in Datadog or Firehose, CloudWatch, etc.
Cool. And I saw another question here that I think was sarcastic, but I'm going to answer it anyway. At least I'm going to do my best try is, why would you use Ngrok as an ingress? And my first thought here is, I have an on-prem in my house Kubernetes cluster, and I also run EKS clusters. And this would be a way to unify that across both. I'm assuming I could run at the same time, right? Because you have your global edge network. And if I want to route someone if I want my neighbor to hit my local cluster, but everyone else can hit my EKS cluster, I could do that based on that IP routing, right? Because I can have Ngrok in both places, serving the same app from both places. And Ngrok could basically be my global router at that point, right?
Yeah, we need to do a little bit of work on the Ingress controller itself to allow running it in multiple clusters and have them basically configure the same thing to load balance. But if, for the example, that Go app with the SDK installed, you run that on a Raspberry Pi, your computer, multiple EKS clusters, and your home box, it would actually load balance between all of those using labels.
Awesome. So building it in the app can use those labels. And then Ingress doesn't do that today, but in the app itself, I could run it in multiple locations. And then as people hit Ngrok on the edge, it gets routed to the correct location.
Yeah. And we also, a lot of what Ngrok is also is a big geographically or globally distributed edge network. So we are in 8 or 9, I forget, we are adding more EKS clusters, AWS regions around the globe. And so those agents will actually connect to the closest geographic location that they spin up in. And then when a user tries to access the tunnel, they'll actually also hit the closest geographic location. So you'll actually get some like optimized routing to some degree when we say one user. I don't think we can specifically say like this user should go to this cluster, but they'll go to the closest load balanced one to them, trying to get faster responses for them. So.
With that edge network, you mentioned adding headers to my request. Right? It hits your edge. I can add some headers. Is there any more work I can do at your level, at the Ngrok level? Like if I look at, we have CloudFront functions, we have Lambda at edge, we have things that we say, hey, I can do some work over here to do something before I route it. It's like common use cases, maybe like I need to look at your cookie and see who you are to where I'm going to route you before I even send you somewhere else. Is there anything like a function-based capability of Ngrok as a platform?
Not quite. I know I've seen some product specs around that. Scott, you could actually show the dashboard, show your edge view if you just want to show kind of all the different modules. But yeah, there is talk about modification of the body, like if you wanted to use functions to modify the requests in whatever way you want. But yeah, and then there is also, as part of as the platform grows, kind of the idea of bring your own functions and bring your own backends, bring your own runtimes. But here, this shows basically most of the modules and modifications that you can make, which are mostly what we talked about. There are a couple of different types of backends as well that you could have, like static response backends, where if they hit a particular path, it just is a redirect for them, things like that. But
and that's like, I mean, as that platform, like that routing piece and global availability is not is not a low bar. Like that's a hard thing to do. And what you were mentioning earlier in the slides was like all of those components add up to like someone needs to own this in a production environment. Someone needs to have expertise in these areas. But in this case, you're unifying that API to say, hey, like all of this stuff can be the same API layer instead of going to log into the switch and I have an app for my router and I have something else for my load balancer, and all of those things can kind of like be collapsed into this single platform. Is a really cool just functionality for someone either on a small team or someone trying to reduce the complexity of all of the other things they do that can do one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, it honestly reminds me a lot of what a lot of Kubernetes has tried to do with kind of inverting that control mechanism, especially with the gateway spec, where like one team can configure domains and like specific authentication bits, but then give everyone else kind of self-service, like, hey, you can add Ingress for whatever service you spin up, just create an Ingress object. And as long as you're using an account that we've authorized and it works with the Ingress controller, and we have restrictions in place, you can just self-service as a team to create your own Ingress, so you don't have to go log tickets or anything. So,
I think Michael's asking an important question here too that maybe other people have, is how much of this is free? Which portions of this could someone use without needing a pro accounts? Is Ingress free? Are the modules free? Like where is that line for what Ingress offers for someone to go ahead and give it a shot?
Yeah.
The answer I usually give is, well, I'm not in sales, so I don't know the exact line. But essentially, I believe, Alex, they can get a free static domain, a free custom domain. They can do Ingress, right? They can do Ingress, and then I
believe OAuth.
OAuth.
Because OAuth is everyone needs OAuth. Like,
there we go.
There you go.
Hey, turns out there's a page for it. I should have get
What? We're amazing. Look at that.
Yeah. One of our big goals was you should be able to run the Ingress controller and use it, at least in local or single application type of situations in a free scenario. So for that, for example, like it just wouldn't work with a random subdomain, which is what we used to have. So now everyone gets at least one static or static domain. And then OAuth, like if you're putting things on the internet, you probably also want to have security is kind of the mentality. Like they're kind of a security first mentality group around that. So, that's also included. So
Cool.
I think there's a little bit more info if you click the full feature list button.
Full feature list button.
Maybe scroll to.
Oh, right there.
There you go.
Here we go.
I mean, the fact that free column was longer than all of the others shows
Right?
a lot for what you can do to try it out and see what problems is it solving for you, right? Because everyone has their own unique problems of routing traffic or how things are set up or not having access to things. And if this can solve some of those problems and help you simplify your routing stack, then that could be a benefit to a lot of people in a lot of environments. And if you're going to use it for production and traffic, like pay, but like he's like,
Right.
you should let someone else take care of that with supports and various things that you probably want for a production environment.
Yeah.
Cool. Scott, did you have anything else to show? You wanted to show off or talk about?
No, that was it. Essentially wanted to show how we could easily connect to EKS, and that's essentially all that needed to be shown as far as how to do it.
Well, you should have had more problems with your demo.
I was, what was going on the inside, right? On the insides, I was like, please work, so yeah.
But you only plan for, a 20 to 30 minute demo and you're like, oh, now we have some time.
Right. Now we got stuff to talk about. All right, let's do this.
One question that came up here was you mentioned Databricks. There is the case study. I have it in the comments from before, if you scroll up a little bit. But are they using the Kubernetes Ingress controller? Or are they using the self-hosted Ngrok option?
Yeah, they're using the self-hosted option. I don't believe they're using the Ingress controller. Ingress controller is fairly new. We just kind of got it out for KubeCon out in Amsterdam and things as getting a support for the free tier. So I believe they probably use the agent. I don't know if they're using the SDKs yet, but yeah, you can kind of bake those into your product that then you distribute, so you don't even show Ngrok all over the place.
Right. It's a domain, right? It's like, it's a domain we control. It doesn't matter how it got here. Like we have a domain, you can route to it. It's perfect. So cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on and showing it to us. Thanks everyone else for joining and asking all the great questions. Is there somewhere that they could reach out? I mean, we have the Slack in chats if someone wants to join and ask questions there. Is there somewhere else that they should ping either of you for questions? Or
you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at @StMcAllister, and but also on Slack. So if you go to ngrok.com/Slack, you can find us in our community there.
Yep, that's probably the best spot for me too. I'm not on Twitter or X anymore, unfortunately, but I have notifications set up for the word Ingress. So if you talk about it in there, I may pop it in and see if I can help. So,
perfect.
Nice.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining and have a great day.
Great.
Thanks, y'all.